Hi everyone, I wanted to talk to you about the 8 steps of MAST. I also want to refer to some other videos that go with this. These are the 8 steps in their fullness. The other videos have each step in their detailed form. Those other videos have some theoretical framework to it, not that this doesn't, okay, but the other ones give each one in more breakdown of detail and the finite details of what should happen in each step. This is a general overview. The 8 steps are broken into 2 different halves, okay, and I teach this by using my 2 hands. There is a drafting hand and there is a checking hand. These go together, but they're definitely distinct parts. I also want you to notice that I'm holding up 4 fingers on each hand. That's because there's 4 steps in each side of what happens in the process. The first is the drafting side. The drafting side is controlled by time, and so we're actually working with a person going through time elements because we want to get the most out of the brain and work with long-term and short-term memory at the same time. Okay, I'll explain more of that a little bit later. Okay, but each of the steps are controlled by time. The first step is consume. Consume has one primary function: take in the source text. And that's different for different forms of translation. For example, in written translation, you might read, but you also might prefer as a learner to actually hear the source text. That's okay. Either one is okay. Others who do not read, they want to take in that source text orally. Others for sign language have a different variety of skills and they actually may need support for that. But regardless, it's about taking in a whole chapter. Why a whole chapter? It's because it gives the larger context of what's happening. What you don't want is to start small, you want to start big. By getting the foundation of the chapter, when they get to those details, they understand the relationship of those details into the whole picture of things. If you're to walk into a room and see, where am I? You want the whole room first. The second step is to verbalize. Okay, verbalize is a step that means push out an expression of what you just consumed. We used to call this the discussion step. We no longer do that because we don't want interaction back and forth. This is about the brain. The brain takes in text, now the brain pushes out text. And those 2 things in sequence are incredibly powerful for the translator because now they've activated their memory, and their short-term memory is alive. How long does it take to do the first step of consume? Usually about 7 minutes on average. What about verbalize? 2-3 minutes. This is what I read. That's all you need to do, is this is what I read. And they express it to another person. Now they could do it to anything. They could do it to a wall. They could do it to their paper. They could do it to a recorder. But what we're trying to do is make translation an interactive experience, and if there is a partner, use that partner, and it forms an accountability. The third step is to chunk. This is a brain science term. This is a grouping. Chunking is basically saying, let's put things in bite-sized groups. Okay, if I were to give a phone number from the West in America, it starts with +1. And then it gives an area code, 3 numbers. And then it gives another 3 numbers, and then it gives 4 numbers. In other countries that's different, but that's what chunking looks like. Pieces that you can remember. In Scripture, it looks like pieces that you can remember. You can't remember the whole chapter in great detail, so which verses go together? And so you find those verses that go together in a workable form for meaning. Maybe it's 2 to 3 verses, maybe it's 3 to 4 verses. Sometimes with Paul in very dense writing in the New Testament, it might be 1 verse because it has 8 thoughts in it. It depends on each verse and each chapter. So you chunk out the chapter. What you don't want is sentence by sentence, phrase by phrase, or verse by verse translation. It's too small. Your brain can do more. You want to exercise it, so make a chunk. And it's usually 3, 4, 5 verses. Once you have those chunks, you're going to do something that people really don't like, and it's the 4th step. It's called blind draft. The reason we do this is because we want memory to become the active processor of language. We also want to capture naturalness. So you take one chunk, and then you close the source text and you blind draft it. You write down, or you say orally, the new scripture. And you do that whole chunk the best you can. Will there be mistakes? Of course there will. Okay, and that's not the goal. That's not the end. That's a part of the process. That's the drafting. There's always mistakes in drafting, no matter what process you use. So let it go for now. Capture naturalness, and that's what you've done in blind draft. It's like this. If I want to go to a store and I want to order something and I want to do it in another language that I'm just learning, or it's not my best language, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually practice it in a small piece and see the reaction for that. That's what chunking is doing. That's what blind draft is doing together. At that point, you've completed every chunk in your chapter and you've done the 4 steps of drafting. Now you want to do the 4 steps of checking. And what people should do is immediately relieve themselves from the pressure of a blind draft. Close your source text, do a chunk, do another chunk, do another chunk, and finish all of your chunks. And now go back and do a comparable for your newly translated scripture and compare it to the source text you translated from. And in doing that, you now get to look for any mistakes that you have. You can use anything you want to help you. Usually though, you're looking to say, how did I do? How did this sound? What am I missing? What do I need to add? That's called a self-edit. You do that step by yourself, and that's the first of 4 steps in checking. The second is a peer edit. This is like a classroom where you trade your paper. Go find a peer and trade with them and have them look for things that might be missing, might have mistakes, or they don't sound good to them. You want other people to actually look and give you feedback. If you're still not comfortable and you think, I'm not sure if I did a good job, have other people join in. You can do 1 peer edit, you can do 3, you can do 4, but these are important steps for you to get other opinions to what you're doing. The third step is really critical. It's called keyword check. In this one, you want to go through an entire chapter and you want to first have a partner who's going to check with you what it is that you did. What they're going to do is circle every word that's important. Okay, now I know what you're thinking, is that every word in Scripture is important. And some people will even cite Revelation and say, you must keep every single word. You know, that's not how language works. You can't keep every single word from one language to a next language. You have to keep meaning pieces to that. And the way to do that in Scripture is to take the important critical words, the theological words, and then the words of important meaning for comprehension. So circle those words and then ask your partner, is it there? Okay, for example, a theological word is spirit. Is the word spirit there? How about the word holy? Is that there? How about the word God? Is it there? Is Jesus there? All the names that are in Scripture, are those there? Then directions. They're not theological words, but they're important words. Numbers are important words. Locations of places. And so you need to check every single one of them and ask this question. Is it there? Every word that you circled, is it there? And if the translator starts to say no 3, 4, 5 times in a chapter, they missed something. They skipped some steps. Have them go back and do a peer edit or a self-edit. After you've asked, is it there? And you see that all the words are there, then go back and ask for definitions on the words that are not obvious. For example, what word did they use for spirit? In some languages, this could mean many different things, and you want to use the right word that's in the source text the same way. So you ask for a definition. Finally, you have verse by verse check, and that's the last of the checking steps and the last of the MAST steps. And this verse by verse check is to find a partner, and they're going to go through every single verse. They're going to do a comparable. They're going to look for everything. They're going to use every resource available that they have. Notes, questions, words, and they're going to look for everything and compare verse to verse all the way through. Doesn't that seem tedious if you've done all those other things? Yes, it does. And what you're doing is you're capturing small meaning in key words, and you're capturing context meaning by each verse. You want both of those to happen because you're dovetailing containers of mistakes so that they can't escape. And what you're doing is making sure that you're checking it in a variety of ways with different eyes. And when you've done all of this, you've captured naturalness in different layers, you've captured accuracy in different layers, and you are really seeing a high quality production through these 8 steps. And mistakes are rarely found if those steps are done well. And so those are the 8 steps in their whole. If you do them well with fluent bilingual people, you're going to have a great translation. Thank you so much. Please watch the other videos on each step for breaking them down one by one. Enjoy.